With KTN Prime. Now we talk about the state of the nation. And joining me for this particular conversation to my immediate right, Kevin Osido, Executive Director, County Governance Watch. Good evening, karibu sana.
Shukran.
It's been a while.
Sana kwa mwaliko.
Anytime, karibu.
Can we do the show in Swahili?
Well, not today.
You can do it in your mother tongue.
Next to Osido, we have Dismas Mokua, Political Risk Analyst. Dismas, good to see you as always.
Same here. Thanks a lot for the invitation.
All right. And of course, we expect Maliba Arnold, who's a party leader at Progress Plus Alliance. But as we wait for Maliba, perhaps you can start this conversation. I mean, it's been quite a few eventful weeks, from protests and now, you know, to the killings that we've seen. And now we have seen Sabasaba is just right around the corner, and there are planned protests. Perhaps, Dismas, I can start with you. I mean, we've seen the government term these protests as an attempted coup. In your view, was it?
Well, you know what has happened the last couple of days is really nothing fundamentally new from what you've seen taking place from 1963. But I think it was very unfortunate for a cabinet secretary of rank to say that it was an attempted coup, because from the basic definition of a coup, the people who normally attempt a coup are military men. And what we saw is people who are in the streets. I mean, there was Gen Z, there was youth groups, a variety of people from various socioeconomic states, various demographics, who had a legitimate issue they wanted to present to the administration. And while it's a fact that the entire march was invaded or infiltrated by criminal elements, I don't think that is sufficient to say that it was an attempted coup. And then number two, also, there were words which were used that it was an act of terrorism again. And in my view, again, that is unacceptable, because if you're the head of the security agencies in Kenya, or you've got overall responsibility at a cabinet level, then one would expect that you've got access to intelligence. So in the unlikely event that there were a few persons within the demonstrations who maybe had nefarious objectives, or they wanted even to engage in an act of terrorism, then with the precision you pick them out. And about the military coup, in my view, that was very, very extreme and very unfortunate. But I think what we need to ask ourselves is that after all these events have happened, what are the lessons? Because you see, when you've got a glass, you can either say it's half full or it's half empty. But you need to ask yourself, what are we actually learning from these demonstrations? And in my view, there are two things. Number one is public participation. Public participation in Kenya has largely been ceremonial, and that is why people are going to the streets by saying, we've got very valid concerns we'd like to present to the authorities, but there's no structured way of presenting it. You would recall during the finance bill, which has just been signed a few days ago, people sent emails, and the chairman of the Finance Committee at the National Assembly had the alacrity to say that it's going to be considered as a spam mail. And never mind that it's actually the National Assembly which had invited people to present those things. And then number two is the place for meritocracy. It seems right from independence. If you look at the cabinet's formation during independence, it was, one would say it was diamond quality. Top talent, equivalent to what you would have, say, in South Korea or Singapore. But as we keep on moving, it looks like every single day we are saying bye to meritocracy and inviting mediocrity, because you've got some senior public servants of rank that when they make policy pronouncements, you can easily get blood pressure, or you can even miss a heartbeat. You wonder, wow, did he actually say that? That would never happen during the first cabinet, the one of President Jomo Kenyatta. So in my view, for us to make progress, we must go the extra mile and embrace two levels of meritocracy. That when you're electing leaders, anybody for an elective position, straight from MCA to the presidency, they must demonstrate to us that they've got merit, that there is meritocracy, and they demonstrate to the rest of the society that, in fact, they're superior to everybody else.
How do they demonstrate
that? They've got a certain talent. There are many ways to do that. It could be maybe through the academic trajectory, that you've gone to school, you've gotten good grades, you know, bachelor's, master's, PhD. It could be through sports, that you are a talented sportsman, you are a talented musician. But how would you expect us to make progress if the only thing you present to the table is that you've been active, say, in wash, or you've been a goon, or you've stolen resources, and you have managed to engage in a campaign and win an elective seat. So if you do that, then we'll keep on sliding. And then number two, we must also embrace, so the first one is democratic meritocracy, that we are voting for people, so we must vote for quality candidates. So you don't vote for somebody simply because he comes from your village, or maybe you share a surname, he's called Osido, you're called Osido, so you vote for him. Or maybe because he's stolen resources and he's put up a village shop which does all the welding free for all the churches, and that is the only qualification. Okay. Then there's the non-democratic meritocracy. That is now in the public service. Again, when you look at a number of senior appointments in the public sector, you also begin to wonder. Okay. You can look at the list of parastatal heads, chairman, managing director, even some public servants of rank like principal secretaries. When you look at them, you will really begin to wonder, asking yourself, how did we get here? Because the reason why people go to the streets is that because of poor policy formulation and execution. So if the people who are responsible for this do not subscribe to meritocracy, then you'll be making no progress. Okay, just to, welcome Maliba. Maliba, good to see you. Karibu sana.
Thank you.
All right, before we get to you, because I know you've been pushing for the removal of the top chiefs and, should I say, an overhaul of the security agency sector, particularly the bosses. Maybe Osido can come in. I mean, Dismas, you talked about mediocrity, and I don't want to use that term, but the government seems to be making blunders day in, day out. And Kenyans are wondering, are you really listening? Talk to us about these constant blunders. Yet Kenyans are saying, you know what, we want this, this, and this. And as Dismas says, there's some shocking statements that are being made that you wonder, really.
Thank you so much. Part of why this is happening is largely because of our political culture. And this political culture is gobbled in the manner in which we do our politics, run our elections, and declare our candidates. And we know, for example, that the Constitution of Kenya, for certain positions, there is a threshold called 50% plus one. And this 50% plus one are not pens. They are human beings in the name of votes. And how this bargaining is done is based on how many people you can present to a table in form of a voter block. So that we say, if you want to be president, tell us, one, how much you have and how many people you can bring to the table. Number two, you want to be a deputy or a running mate, how many people can you present to us? And we can go on and on and on. So that kind of a conversation, therefore, determines ultimately what in governance we call forming a government. So Kevin Osido cannot just be seated somewhere and is waiting for people to campaign, to spend their monies, to mobilize and lobby, and then you show up and you say, make me PS for devolution. Despite as many PhDs I might have, as intelligent as I may be. But then the question that those who sat there when the calculations were happening would ask is, but Osido, what did you bring to this table? And that is, in my view, the biggest challenge that we have as a country. And even in many other quarters, we have had people saying Gen Zs don't vote, the youth don't vote, they slept, 8.4 million of them, even in 2027, we know they will not vote. And it's largely because of a culture that we have seen being bred and grown. That one dismisses a certain sect or a certain populace. And that's why, for me, I get very excited when I see young people saying, tutarauka, tutachukua kura, and it is either one term or no term or whichever term you talk about.
They're even saying they'll take their parents' IDs.
Precisely, because now they have known that how government is formed is not by absconding the date of the election. You must show up. And after showing up, we have also been now informed through experience, including Supreme Court petitions or presidential petitions, that you must protect that vote. And that is how you become a PS. That is how you become a deputy governor somewhere. That is how you become all these advisors that we see being paraded all over. Because of a gap that is seemingly the imagination once you form government is that, yes, we have something that we want to offer, but we might not be the right people. But the people who stand at the face of it are the political faces. That is why, actually, even for President William Ruto, who said that my cabinet will not be made of politicians, but we see them. Every reshuffle that comes in, we have more than 70% politicians because you are wearing not for the sake of the future generation, but it's about the future election. So if I don't give the Mijikenda, somebody that can mobilize and organize and can go there and speak on my behalf, will I really be guaranteed those votes? If you don't go to the Luos, as an example, and pick up Luo Nyanza and say, Mheshimiwa Raila Amolo Odinga, can we shake hands? And you run there 11 times plus. Will I be guaranteed of a replacement from Mount Kenya? You know? And so that is really the biggest challenge, as opposed to what the citizens expect. That yes, we can, you can give us your manifestos, we can do all this drama of politics and campaigns, but that once you form government, we expect you to deliver services. So from the moment you pick that Bible and you are sworn in, people expect that the moment you put it down, is not for us to regress and go back to the issues, challenges that we have been facing, from healthcare to education, to youth unemployment, to abductions, which you said, the moment I am sworn in, there will be no such a thing. But it becomes so difficult because the balance of doing politics and running a government after you form it is so difficult, particularly, and in our context, President William Ruto, who has been a deputy president for 10 years. And then 2 years into an election, he said, I know where to fix. And the moment I get in, Wakenya mutasherekea sana, sababu hii sasa ni serikali ya hasla. But that is not what people are feeling. So the balance between citizens' expectation, running a government, and meeting these expectations of the citizens becomes so difficult, particularly, again, as I head towards finishing, if you are vested, which means that you still want to run again. And it would be interesting to see a two-term president. Say, for example, you have served your full term and you have nothing to lose. I'm sure that all these issues around and about trying to fix things would not be there because you have nothing to gain, whether you lose it, because anyway, you are not running for office. But the moment you are still vested, you want to get people like cabinet secretaries who will speak nothing, who will fix nothing. But that is what it means to be in office, to play politics, that unfortunately, from my personal observation, only attempts to respond to one part of this bargain. And so that, for example, because Mheshimiwa Mokua spoke about this, my good friend C.S. Murkomen, who makes statements, and you ask yourself, but 4 years ago, where were you? And would you really be in a position to make similar statements today? What has changed? It is not that he's dropped his acumen, his intelligence or anything. It is purely because it is politics at play. And he's trying to spew a certain congregation or a certain group of people that might be responsive to what he is saying, regardless of what other people will feel. And sadly, actually, that is how, in my view, I look at the state of affairs as we are today, where, of course, you will seek for accountability, but even institutions of governance that you expect to guarantee that accountability have to want to play politics and sit back and say, but if we do a press statement, what will the head of state think about us? Will we be given budgetary allocations? So you are seated at the judiciary and you are asking yourself, if we rule in this manner, this case has very high political octane. If we rule in this manner, will we get budgets allocated or will we? So the context is so politicized that even the good brains that Mheshimiwa Mokua is talking about feel so disadvantaged, and they have to more or less play ball into the politics.
All right, Maliba, coming to you. I mean, you're part of the team that is pushing for President William Ruto to fire the Interior CS Kipchumba Murkomen as well as police bosses. Why? Talk to us about that.
I think the reason why we are pushing and actually asking the president to proceed and send the CS Onesimus Murkomen at home, it's not just Murkomen alone. It's also the IG of police and his 2 DIGs. And then, of course, there's the director of the National Intelligence Service. We believe that these individuals do not present the kind of face that will allow the president to have a genuine conversation with the people. Because we are getting to Monday, it will be on 7th. If you have looked at Homa Bay, that can actually speak to you about how Monday will look like. But if you look at 25th, just the 25th this year, and last year's 25th, it's a failure of dialogue. We didn't just get to talk to each other. The government didn't get to listen to what people were saying, and the people probably did not communicate in the way government, or rather the government of the day thought it would listen. So if the president, at the moment, there's very little we can do as pertains to the place of the president. There is the transition way of how he actually would get out of office. But he is the president. He is the leader of the country. He is the head of state, the symbol of national unity. So we simply are calling him to actually take on the prerogative of leadership and demonstrate, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. We will have to sit down and talk to each other, whether it will be through the ballot, whether it will be through the boardrooms. We will have to talk to each other. But somebody has to be an adult in the room. We, of course, grudgingly have chosen to actually allow it because he is elected and he has got the mandate, and because to whom much is given, much is expected of him. So he swore by the Constitution. He lifted the Bible because he's a Christian, I think. So we want him to simply stand by that and become the leader here, because he's not going to talk to these young people. And one of the reasons why Gen Zs are actually out there demonstrating is because we millennials have stuck in the corridors of decision making for far too long. You know, we millennials were very obsessed with getting on tables and negotiating. And then the people ahead of us found ways around keeping us in corridors, waiting with our files. So we've been in those corridors. Those young people cannot find ways of actually putting their message through. So they've decided to actually change tact and go out there. So I think for this administration that I worked for at some point, there's this thinking that propaganda is strategy. They actually confuse propaganda for plans. They confuse propaganda for strategy, for policy. That you're just going to get out there, say anything and get away with it. Because look at this, you know, just, I think it was on Tuesday, before 25th June last week. So one thing happens. In the dead of the night, there's a report that comes out that the National Intelligence Service has actually released a statement that somehow there will be terrorism on Wednesday. As in, who does that? And you know, people have been through these spins for far too long. We know too well. And you see, the linchpin of that thinking, or rather that dispatch, is that Israel and Iran are fighting, and therefore there could be, they've actually just gotten that. We've not seen travel advisories from the usual guys. Normally it's the Israelis, the Americans, and the other people. No partners has actually come around that. But they want to use that. And then the statement gets, you know, this should be an intelligence report, but then it gets political. One of those paragraphs reads this, that these demonstrations are no longer just demonstrations as allowed in law, but they have got other ends that they want to achieve, and therefore all agencies under Article 239 should actually take on or adopt an anti-terrorism posture, a full anti-terrorism posture, and consider demonstrations as potential areas of operations.
Yes.
That is outlawing demonstrations. You simply are pulling a coup on the Constitution by use of some clever thing. And something happened in Uganda on that day. If you follow news, is that in Uganda, on that very Wednesday, there was, some officers were actually arrested for staging fake terrorist activities. And you know what some of us actually think? You know, we've really never gotten to how Besigye left this country. One would want to think, were the officials in Uganda trying to return a hand? You know, that is Swahili, on how we go around that. Otherwise, if you had to look at it, I think I have seen Mokua here trying to be very academic and trying to be very very good about these issues, speaking about Singapore and South Korea. I've also seen my brother Osido there also trying to get very diplomatic around these issues. But let's be real. You know, a general is as good as his men. As in, William Ruto is just exactly the man you see. You know, we gave him the power to make a choice. And the people you see, the people you're talking about who cannot do work properly and everything else, those are, according to William Ruto, his council of the wise. We gave him the mandate and told him, get the best of men amongst ourselves and administer state. So the people you see there, and I don't think they're even CSS in this country, they're only filling those positions because it's required constitutionally. Otherwise, the president will run the country alone because literally I think he is the CS general, and then I think the head of public service is the deputy CS general. Because literally, CSS are seeing their names on gazette notices that they didn't read. CSS are meeting people in parastatals, running parastatals that they have never met, they didn't appoint. So literally, the president is the CS general, and of course the head of public service is the deputy CS general. So do not think that anything will change. And the first qualification, I think, to get any substantive position in this administration is, number one, either to be laid back or be incompetent. Otherwise, we cannot argue, and I've seen Osido trying to talk about politics being the reason. It's not. Because if you looked at Kenya Kwanza has got some very good and competent people. But what are those people normally given? They're given some fringe jobs at the very, down there, jobs that don't make sense. But William Ruto does not have a problem of getting clever, competent men amongst the people that supported him. Out of 7.2 million people, you can't tell me that there is only a tyranny of brains when you cross over to Azimio. By the way, the experts that Azimio sent to ODM are very average people when you go to ODM. Very average. Some of the sharpest tools in ODM were not even given out. I think Baba kept the best for himself, just in case.
Okay, Maliba, let's just take a short break. We'll be back with more.